Today I'm working on the torque tube, which is out of my 1940 Ford Coupe. What my focus is today is getting the grease seal out of the end of this torque tube. I was already able to pull the bearing sleeve out, so next it's getting the grease seal out. So what I did was get a long piece of rod. Once I located the piece of rod, I made sure it was long enough to fit all the way down the torque tube to the very end, with a little bit left over so I can hit the end of it. And I welded a washer to the end right here. This washer is going to help you grab the edge of the seal that's inside the torque tube so you can knock it out. I also did a little bend in the rod, and the reason I bent it was because this is a later style torque tube with the center bearing, because it has the solid drive shaft. So what you need to do is sort of work your rod through the bearing, and that extra bend sort of helps you angle the rod a little more because you've got that center bearing in the way. So what I did, once I got this bent, once I got the washer welded on the end, I brought the rod up the torque tube, snaked it around and through the bearing, all the way, caught the seal, gave it a couple good whacks, drove the seal out the end of the torque tube. Now in this area of the torque tube is where the seal resides. Now the seal sits on a lip that's inside the torque tube. That's where it rests, where it stays, and how far you know to drive it back in. When you're working with your rod here and you're working on getting the seal out, sometimes this washer will catch the lip. So be careful not to damage that lip. You want to make sure that you're making contact with the seal only as you're driving it out. Now, you've got your new grease seal and bearing kit ready to install. You got your old seal out, and you've taken a rag and gone in and you've cleaned out the opening here, getting out any grease, any grime, whatnot. Now you're ready to put in the new seal. So get a socket that's big enough for the circumference of the seal, or just about, and get an extension, a long extension or an extension just deep enough to go down inside the torque tube. Get your seal. Bring it down inside the torque tube. Try to get it as centered as possible. Slide it in as far as it will go by hand. Take your socket with extension. Slide that in. Take a soft hammer, such as this one I have here, and start tapping the new seal down the tube until it is seated. And you can see the new seal that I've already installed in there, seated on the lip down inside the torque tube. Once you've got all that set, you're going to take your bearing sleeve. There's a little alignment pin on the bearing sleeve. And if I roll the torque tube around here, you will see there's a little alignment hole down inside the torque tube. You're going to take your sleeve. You're going to drop it down in there like that. Then you can take the same socket you use for the seal, or if you have a socket that's a little bit bigger that fits. I don't quite have that size socket, so I use this same socket. Give it some taps until it drops down in there tight. And most guys have the K.R. Wilson tool. Well, I say most guys. Some guys have the K.R. Wilson tool. I don't. So I made one. It's just a 1-inch piece of pipe that I goober welded to the end of an 11/16 socket. Got my T-handle on and put a little, oh gosh, just a little tit, a little nipple, if you will, a little end, a little spud that can grab this little spud hole on the bearing sleeve. Because what you're going to want to do is you drop that in there it may not be lined up with the hole inside the torque tube for this indentation. So drop that in, drive it home with this gently, don't slam on it. Use this tool to go inside and turn it until it seats on that spud. Time to install the bearing sleeve. Again, bearing sleeve, this is the little bump that will align the sleeve with the hole down in the torque tube. So I'm just going to drop it in there just like so. Take my large socket with extension and give it some taps. It'll take a little bit of force until it starts to drop down. Okay, now I'm going to take my tool with the little spud on the end and my T-handle, and I'm going to bring it down in there and find that hole in the bearing sleeve, and I'm just going to push and rotate the sleeve, and then you can kind of, did you hear that? It kind of did a little snap or a pop, and it dropped down, and I have got the sleeve lined up inside the tube.